to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Power Talk Friday on A Well-Designed Business. I have Carol Cox with me today. Hi, Carol. How are you?
I'm great, Luann. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so happy that we're doing this again. For any of my longtime listeners, they know exactly who you are, that you are the founder of Speaking Your Brand, and you are also my speaking coach, and you help me immensely when I'm pulling together content and everything else and trying to craft it into a cohesive speech. So I totally adore you for your skill in that. For anybody that may be new to my podcast, I'm going to tell them a little bit about you. Speaking Your Brand is a brand, it's a podcast, it's a coaching firm where Carol helps high-performing, purpose-driven women entrepreneurs and professionals shape their business and their personal brands, share their message, and become recognized as influencers in their field. I said that she has a podcast. Carol is also a TEDx speaker. She is a presenter. She trains people clearly on public speaking, branding, and leadership for women. She also is a teacher of business and marketing classes at a Florida university, and she, during the election season, serves as a political analyst on TV news. So the thing is, that's all well and good. I just love you. That's the reality.
I love you too, Luann.
You got all that cred, but whatever. So the thing is, everybody, Carol and I had occasion about a month ago to talk. And I was saying to her how so many of my guests are being given the opportunity to take part in panel discussions. So we all know that we go to High Point and we go to Design Bloggers Conference and we go to the IWCE and we go to all of these industry events. And sometimes the panelists are, the celebrity of our industry, and they've done it 2 and 3 and 5 and 6 and 7 times. But sometimes a designer is not as well known, and it's their first opportunity to be in front of all of us, their peers, on a panel discussion. And it occurred to me that maybe there were certain aspects that we should be thinking about when an opportunity like that is presented to us, on the best tactics. Because I know from working with Carol that there is a difference in the way you craft a keynote speech and as opposed to the way you craft a workshop presentation. And so my thought to her, what I said to her is there a difference in what you do for a panel discussion? She was like, absolutely. So I said, well, I usually am the moderator, so I don't really need to worry about it, but I'm happy to learn something, but all of you may have the opportunity. So Carol, tell us, how do we be a great panelist?
Well, this is a fantastic topic, and I'm so glad that you're talking about this on your podcast, Luann, because I'm sure we've all been to conferences, and there are times when we see a really great panel and we're really engaged as the audience members and we're interested and we're listening and we get a lot of value out of it. And I'm sure there's also been times that we've been listening to panels and it just is not useful to the audience. Right. It's almost like the panelists are not gelling well together. Like they feel like they're very separate entities. Like they're almost having their own monologues or just conversation with the moderator by themselves and not involving the other panelists, or what they're sharing is not useful information to the audience. So there's just a disconnect. And as a panel member, and definitely as a moderator, and we can talk about both roles, but as a panelist, you want to make sure that you're connecting with not only the other panelists and the moderator, but this is so key, and this is where a lot of panelists miss out, is connecting with the audience. Is that they forget that there's an audience out there listening, and they almost feel like it's like they're on a TV set. And so you mentioned that during election seasons, I'm a political analyst on TV news. So when we go in there, there's no audience, right? It's
right,
just
right.
And a couple other people and the camera crew, and that's pretty much about it. And so obviously you're just connecting with the people who you're having that discussion with. But when you're at a conference on a panel with an audience in front of you, you're not in an enclosed set. You need to reach out to the audience. A good panel moderator will do this. However, if the moderator is not doing it, as a panelist, I will do it. I'll address the audience directly and say something like, well, how many of you have also experienced this? Show of hands, raise your hand. Have you all also had this situation? Like you're breaking that wall that shouldn't be there in the first place between you and the audience.
I love this advice because I think that I could see somebody feeling like they maybe they shouldn't do that's not appropriate. And what am I doing talking out to an audience that can't collectively answer me in one voice, and therefore I'm not starting an individual discussion. But the truth is, you're right. Even if you just say it out there and then say show of hands, you're not requiring verbal interaction, but you are engaging them. So that's a great tip. I like that. And I have to say, when I think about being an audience member with a panel discussion that has not worked, it's often been for the one reason that you mentioned, that we're like not in the room. Like you said, it may as well be on TV. And secondly, sometimes I feel like one of the grossest missteps that I feel like I notice is there just sometimes tends to be one member that just doesn't get it, that they're the one of three people. Like the moderator will ask them a question and they go on and don't engage the other people on the panel, don't engage the audience. And it's almost like it's become their show. And it's, the moment, Carol, because when that person is on the panel like that, as soon as they are done, then somebody talks to them and it's almost like they grab it back again, right? It's
yes.
Like completely unaware of that there's four other people there and an entire audience, right?
Yes, they tend to monopolize the conversation. And again, this is where the moderator, it's really their role, their responsibility to guide and steer the conversation to make sure that that one panelist is not monopolizing the conversation.
Can you get up and put a brown bag on their head and say, sorry, we asked the wrong person?
Well, and we can talk about the process of selecting good panelists, and also whether if you're asked to be on a panel, you also want to find out who else is on the panel, because that may influence your decision whether or not to say yes. But we'll get back to how to select good panelists. But if there is someone monopolizing the conversation, now if you are the moderator, and I've moderated and I've been on, I don't even know how many panels over the past 15 years, probably close to 50 or maybe even more than that.
Whoa.
So I've done this a lot. And as the moderator, I will interrupt the person if they're going too long or they're going off on tangents. Now, I will do it politely and professionally, but I'll say something like, Susie, that's a great point. Let me go ahead and get Luann's input on this. And I'll just straight up interrupt them.
Right.
Because my role as the moderator is to serve the audience, not to serve that person's ego.
Right. And at that moment, everybody in the audience went, thank you, Carol. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Right. I mean, like, you can't cut someone off after 15 seconds, but you get, and this is the other thing about being a moderator and a panelist, is you have to feel the energy of the room. Yes. You can tell when the audience starts getting disconnected. They start looking at their phones. They start getting like they rustle in their seats. And that's where then I will throw a question to the audience to get to reel them back in and engage them back into the discussion. Or I will ask a question that's a little bit controversial, where I know not all of the panelists are going to agree with each other. And those are the kinds of conversations that I look for. I don't ask everyone the same question and have all four panelists answer the same question in a row and then do that on repeat for the entire hour. That's super boring. Right. I want a really natural, organic conversation that gets to some really meaty topics.
I like it. I like it. That's, and you're right when you made the point about reading the audience, because look, sometimes people talk for a longer than normal amount of time, but sometimes it's great and everybody's eating it up and everybody's enjoying it and it's relevant and it's energizing. And if the audience but I think you feel that the same way. Like if you're enjoying it and feeling it, the audience probably is. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, then the audience probably is as well.
Yes,
right?
Precisely.
Okay. So what you probably have things you want to talk about, but I have things that I want to ask.
Well, you ask first, and then I'll fill in any gaps.
Okay. So say you find yourself. So say there's a designer listening who's been invited to speak on a panel. We have High Point coming up in another 2 or 3 weeks at this point, and there will be probably 20 different panel discussions organized over the course of 4 or 5 days. Say you find yourself on a panel discussion and you do have that one person that isn't seeing themselves clearly and is sort of monopolizing at more opportunities than are appropriate, and the moderator is not skilled enough to bring it back. Is there anything you can do as a panelist, or are you just like, all right, throw in the towel, because if I try and do something myself and if I try and interrupt more than the second or third time, I'm going to look like I'm trying to hog or something?
Right. There is definitely a fine balance. I would say you could definitely interject once or twice, especially if it's apparent that this one person is monopolizing the conversation, and do it the same way that I suggested as a moderator, where you just say, Joe, wow, I love that example that you just gave. And it reminded me of this other situation that I think the audience would really appreciate. So to continue so that way you're praising them. Like you have to compliment the person when you're interrupting them, and then you share, and then the moderator hopefully will catch a clue at that point. And then at some point though, and if the person just continues to do that, hopefully some of the other panelists will jump in as well. Mm-hmm. But you're right that if you tend to do it too many times, then you're going to end up probably looking like the one who's trying to interject too much.
Right.
So that goes back to this idea of, should you even be on the panel to begin with?
So designers, take note of the good panelists over the next couple of weeks at High Point, and if you're invited to be with one that's not,
right.
And the thing is, look, it's just a lot of times people are just passionate about what they're talking about, right? It's not that we're really dissing on people or whatever. They're just not like the way I'm saying. It's not being self-aware enough to recognize that it should be. You're part of a group. You need to leave room for the group, right?
Yes. And again, the moderator should set up some ground rules ahead of time with the panelist and have a conversation ahead of the panel and say things like, okay, I'm not going to ask everyone the same question. So if I ask 2 of you that question and I don't ask the other 2 of you, don't be offended. It's not that I'm not interested in your answer, just that I want to keep the conversation moving around. So you let them know that. You let them know that you are going to ask for areas of difference. And you want examples, you want specific things that the audience can take out of what they're sharing. And that also that if someone is monopolizing the conversation, that as the moderator, I will interject and pull in someone else to share as well. So you're setting those ground rules ahead of time so that hopefully they'll remember these things. Yes. And then they'll understand why you're doing it in the moment on the panel.
That's a good thing. It's like we always say on the show, set your agreements up ahead of time. So I like that. And then that way it's like a little cue, like, oh, that's twice that he or she is, cut into me. So, okay. All right. Hopefully that'll work. So we understand as a panelist that could be a challenge, but there's also a challenge if you're a panelist and you haven't prepared enough things to say. Do you feel, because you also don't want a panelist who not only isn't saying anything, but also doesn't seem bothered that they're not saying anything. Like they're happy to let the train run away from the station. So are there things that we can do as a panelist to prepare ourselves with some things that we feel comfortable saying, even though it's off the cuff, but not off? Like, do we prepare things? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely. I would definitely prepare some talking points and some examples and stories and case studies to share with the audience, depending on how the conversation goes. So you don't want to feel rigidly tied to any points that you've prepared, where you feel like if you don't say all of them, you're missing out. You just want to have things that are, you want to have points that will be triggered in your mind if certain topics come up, or if the moderator asks certain questions. Now, again, the moderator may present to the panelists a list of questions ahead of time and say something like, okay, here's 10 questions. We may not get to all of them, but here are some of the different topics that I would like to touch on. So if you have that, prepare those. Of course, you're not going to memorize answers or anything like that, but you're just going to prepare some notes. And the thing that I feel like audiences want the most, and this is whether you're on a panel or you're doing a keynote like you did, Luann, or if you're doing a workshop or a business presentation, whatever it happens to be, is the audience wants examples and stories that they can relate to and that they can see themselves in and learn from. So really think about stories of the before and after. So it could be as the panelist, whether you're a business owner, interior designer, if you work for a company, whatever it happens to be, about your business or career, or it could be about clients. What was that before state? What were the obstacles that you or that client were facing, and how did you help them, or how did you get over those obstacles? And then what did it look like at the after state? What was that transformation? So having these kind of stories in a story bank that you can pull from based on where the conversation is going, the audience will then be much more engaged in listening to you of those stories than if you just recite statistics or kind of or data points or things that are less contextual.
Okay. So if we get specific with that, a lot of panel discussions now in our industry center around technology because, of course, it's moving at the speed of light and everybody is hungry for information on how to be more efficient because design is a very complex process and there are many, many, many moving parts. So it's hard to automate it and it's hard to systemize it and it's not impossible, but it's difficult. And then when you add technology into it, you want to make sure that you add technology that streamlines it, not clogs it up further. And so if you are invited to talk on, say, that topic, for example, instead of just saying, oh, I use this platform, I use this tool, what you're saying is talk about the way you did the particular process before and the pitfalls of not having it and the things that you were difficult, and then explain by using that particular technology that this happened and that happened and the client experienced this and the ROI for the firm, from a actual proficiency and possibly a profitability standpoint was improved. But to go into the story that includes the people, right, is what you're saying.
Yes, the people and the emotion. Right. And this is where, as business people, we feel like there's no place for emotion in business, or we're supposed to be very data driven, which there is a place for that. But you also have to include the emotion because that's what makes engaging stories. So, and I love this example, Luann, that you shared about the impact of technology in the design business. So let's say and I'm not an interior designer, so I'm just going to use a generic example. Let's say in your business, you needed to adopt a CRM system, a customer relationship management system, to help with your prospecting and your sales. Mm-hmm. And so you could share a story of, in our design business, we had just been doing prospecting and keeping up with our leads on a spreadsheet or on pieces of paper. And they would get lost and we would all get frustrated and we weren't sure who needed to be followed up with who. And then we weren't sure who was doing which aspect of it. So sometimes we were duplicating work. Other leads were falling through the cracks. And so we were not only frustrated, but we were also kind of getting upset with each other and we were losing out on money. Mm. But then we found that a system that we all really liked that had a user interface that was easy for us to use. So we found a system. There was a learning curve. It took us about a month or two to really get into it. But now we can find our leads. We know exactly who's working on it. Everything's been streamlined and has alleviated a lot of stress. Yeah. So notice what I did. Yes. Emotion, frustration, we were getting mad at each other versus at the end, we were much less stressed and we felt peace of mind that we knew where things were going. So
and the violins were playing.
Yes, I think it's a very analytical aspect of it. We had a spreadsheet and then we had a CRM system, right, which is fine. But when you share the emotion, I bet you people remember that story more than they'll remember something else.
Right. Because you could describe it like you're saying without the emotion. Oh, we used to just not have any system for keeping track of all incoming prospects. And now we use XYZ system and it's really good and it's really efficient. Like that's like whatever, like boring. I'm not even going to remember that. Right.
Right.
So I love it. I love it. That's a great suggestion. Okay. So what we're saying is that if we're a panelist, to give careful thought to not being over verbose. I mean, you might be passionate. You might have a lot of good things to say, but be generous and share the stage. And also don't be the mouse, don't have nothing to say. And if you're concerned about not being able to speak off the cuff, and even if you are able to speak off the cuff, to give some careful thought to some specific stories and tips that you will share, whether you have the opportunity or not, have them available to you, and make sure that you include both the tactical reasons why this device or this reason or this thing is good, but the emotional reasons why too. Okay, so they're two really good things. Anything else that we should know as a panelist to make our debut smashing?
Compliment the other panelist, compliment the moderator, compliment the event organizers, compliment the audience, like not in a sappy way, but say nice things, because you will look better to the audience and to the other panelists and the moderator if you are gracious and you're willing to compliment them, even if they may they're in the same business as you. They're interior designers, but obviously we know the world's big enough. Right. They're a client, necessarily your client. So as the panelist, do a little research on each of the other panelists before you come in to that conference, to the panel, so you know what to compliment them on. So you can say, wow, I'm really impressed here. John has been in business for 35 years and he's really has found a way to have a fantastic client experience. I see that in the reviews that are online, and I'm just honored to be here with John.
That's a great tip. That's a really good tip. And it's funny is that I do that by requirement for myself when I interview different interior designers for the show. But that's a great tip for being on a panelist for each of us to, I don't know that another designer would have thought to do that, beyond just if you've never heard of them, like who are they, what are they, but to really find something. That's what I always do with the show. I always say to people, I want to know what your thing is. I know that you can do beautiful design, but what is it that makes you? What makes you? That's what we want to teach your peers. So you're saying to discover that and find something genuine that you can mention or compliment them on during the presentation.
Yes, and weave it in. So, at the beginning of the panel, when you're introducing yourself, you're not going to be like, and by the way, is great at this, and Luann is great at, like, it's just that, then that looks too, it looks planted, right? It looks inauthentic. We don't want to do that. You want to do it as if you would do it if you were having a conversation with them or having a conversation with someone else about them.
Right. Exactly. Well, it comes to, so far, what, two of these tips come down to not underestimating what it takes to be prepared to be a panelist. You don't just wing it. Have your own things prepared, but then also to take the time to prepare something meaningful about each of your co-panelists. That's a great tip. I like that. And or the moderator, and along with the moderator, I would guess.
Yes, absolutely. Because the moderator is usually someone who's maybe an influencer in the industry, or maybe someone they've been around the conference circuit a while, which is why they've been asked to be a moderator. So you definitely want to get on their good side, because, and we may have talked about this, Luann, when I was on your podcast last year, is that speakers get gigs from other speakers. Right. So if you want to do speaking at a conference or an association, or if you want to continue to be a panelist or you want to be a panel moderator, you have to get in good with the other speakers and moderators, because that's who's going to recommend you when other organizations and conferences are looking for speakers and panel moderators. Is they're going to recommend people they know and people they like and people who've done a good job on previous sessions and panels.
Exactly. Okay. I love it. Are there other things that we can do and, prepare and to make us feel and look like a rock star up there?
I highly recommend that you have the panelists bond with each other beforehand. Mm-hmm. So again, as the moderator, this is something that you can take charge of. If you are just the panelist and the moderator hasn't done anything, then reach out to the moderator and suggest a Zoom video call a couple of weeks before the panel so that you all can see each other. And it really can be quick. We're all very busy people. So just say literally 10 to 15 minutes. That's it. just maybe even just 10 minutes so that the panelists and the moderator can jump on a Zoom video call, see each other, kind of get to know each other a little bit, laugh a little bit, have that bonding moment, and then obviously run through any logistics as well. So definitely do that. Now, and in addition to that, at the actual conference or the event is try to get everyone together physically in person, face to face, before the panel actually happens. So whether it's a quick meet up the night before, have at the bar for 15 minutes, or if it's at a breakfast the morning of before the panel starts, because having that face-to-face energy with each other will help with that bonding aspect in front of the audience as well.
Well, I can attest to that firsthand. I have to tell you, we did a panel discussion at America's Mart in Atlanta in September, and I moderated the panel, and on the panel was Sandra from House of Funk, Sarah Daniele, the CEO of My Doma Studio, and Mark McDonough, the founder of Tastefully Inspired. And all of us know each other fairly well through the internet and everything. It was actually the first time that I ever met Mark face to face, but I had known him almost a year at that point. Sandra, of course, and I have worked together for probably 10 or so years. And of course, Sarah Daniele is one of my sponsors, so I talk with her on a regular basis. But when I tell you that event was just so energetic and so fun, and we were talking to each other and we were talking to the audience, and I mean, we had more than a few people email us after that and say, you should take that on the road, that should just be on the industry circuit. You know what I'm saying? And it is a testament to being there with people that now we know each other pretty well, but I agree. Even I'm going to be doing a joint session with Madeline McCrae at the International Window Coverings Expo. At this point, it's next week in Tampa. And Madeline and I were put together because both of our zones of genius is in the sales realm. And so Grace McNamara, the founder of the conference, asked us to do a joint session that related to sales. And the funny thing is of course I wanted to interview her for the podcast and everything like that. And you're so right. We're complete strangers. But after having a 40-minute conversation with her, I'm like, hey, I'm getting off the plane. I'm going to see my buddy Madeline. And it's going to make that presentation so much better, even though we are technically unknown to each other. So great advice. I love that. I love that a lot.
And the great thing about being on a panel is an excellent opportunity for you to network with other people in your industry. So you want to take that opportunity. So if you just confine your interactions with the other panelists to when you're literally on the panel for that 45 minutes or that hour, you're missing out on an opportunity to build that connection even further by having either that Zoom video call or that meetup before the panel, or even to do one after the panel. So Luann, I have another tip that I wanted to suggest for the panelists.
Okay.
So this is about your introduction when you're on the panel. So sometimes the moderator will ask you to send a bio over, or sometimes they'll just go and find one on your website or on the internet somewhere. They'll just Google it. You don't necessarily want that. You want to send the moderator or whoever's introducing you the exact verbiage that you want, because you want to tailor your introduction to the audience and to the panel, whatever the panel topic is or the panel theme is, so that it's related. And you want your credibility statements in there and how long you've been in business or if you've won awards. So things like that show why you're there. So I recommend sending that to the moderator ahead of time via email, but also print it out and bring a hard copy with you on paper, because a lot of times the moderator will have forgotten it, or they'll be looking at it on their phone. Oh, they'll literally just make it up in the moment. And so,
I can't imagine anybody ever doing that.
Yeah, no, not at all. If you have it printed out, then at least you can hand it to them, and they'll introduce you the way that you want to be introduced. That's really important, because it's an opportunity for the audience to learn about you from someone else's mouth, which is always very, which is great. Now, if the moderator has the panelists introduce themselves. So sometimes they'll do that. They don't want to introduce the panelists, or they think it's better for the panelists to introduce themselves. So they'll go around and do that. That's fine. I recommend then doing an I help statement as the way that you introduce yourself. So I call it the brand statement. It's the I help whoever your target audience is do this thing, whatever that thing is, so that they can get these specific results. So that way, when you're introducing yourself, you say, hi, I'm Carol Cox. I'm the founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand. I help high-performing women entrepreneurs create their signature talks and gain more visibility so they can grow their businesses and become influencers in their fields.
I love it.
So that way and then I can say, I've been in business for over 15 years and da da da. So then you can add another sentence on there, but that way the audience knows exactly what it is that you do.
Right.
Well.
I love it. And my loyal listeners will know exactly what that sounds a lot like. And I always have to mention it when it comes up is Nancy Ganskaufer is a business coach that specializes in creatives and interior designers. And she has a process, Carol, called Your Business in Words. And it is the 6 questions that she went through on the podcast, and she has it on her website at nancyganskaufer.com. And she literally teaches you how to do a sentence like that. And really, because the funny thing is Carol, when before working through Nancy's process, I hear you. It's easy enough. It seems like it would be easy enough to say, okay, I help. What do I do? Do people do this? What do I help them do so they can this? But the reality is a lot of interior designers have struggled with it on a simplistic level like that, because they're like, well, I help people decorate homes. You know what I mean? And so it's like, no, I help busy working moms, busy corporate moms, dual couple, high powered families. I have one woman that I interviewed on the show, Lisa Escobar. I help, single, older men. You know what I mean? Like her target demographic is 40 to 65-year-old men, So it's important to not underestimate the sentence that you just shared with us. It takes time to really develop that. But when you develop it to the level that you have, you're right. In every situation, it's a great presentation. So do me a favor, just say yours again, because it's so powerful.
Hi, I'm Carol Cox, the founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand. I help high-performing women entrepreneurs create their signature talk and gain more visibility so they can grow their businesses and become influencers in their fields.
I love it. And that's not like, do you agree with me that you have to take some time to really
No, it took time. Like it's been iterated over the past couple of years for sure. And to your point, Luann, it's very hard to do it yourself because you're too close to yourself and your business, and you can't, sometimes it's harder to see from the outside perspective. And you also, I find it, and this is why my clients come to me, is that verbally saying things out loud to someone else is what gets the ideas moving and then what gets the words to come out versus trying to do it in your own head. There's just too much swimming around and you can't see the forest for the trees. You can't pick out the most important elements.
Right. It's so true. I love it. So before I, plug you a little bit here, are there more tips for this? Because I have a really nice thing I want to make sure everybody knows about you.
I do have one more. So,
okay,
and this is true whether you're a panelist or just a speaker, is that check out the room beforehand that you're going to be in. Either find pictures of it online. That's even great. So you can start visualizing what the room looks like and where you're going to be beforehand. And then definitely when you get to the conference or the event, go and check out the room, see how it's laid out, see what the stage looks like, see what the chairs or the tables look like, the lighting looks like, all of that. And especially for women, figure out how you're going to be seated. Are you going to be on high top chairs where you're going to I'm short, so it's not always easy for me to get on. I mean, I'm 5'3", so I'm not like under 5 foot, but still. Or are you is there going to be a table in front of you that has a drape, so covering your legs?
Right.
Because it may determine how short of a skirt you can or cannot wear, what kind of shoes you want to wear. You also want to know, should you bring a jacket? Is the room cold? So checking the room out beforehand and knowing how you're going to sit is really important because you don't want to end up in an environment where you're sitting on a chair and it's not quite providing enough coverage for you.
It's the truth. I mean, I can think of several times where I have been seated and our seated is at the eye level of the audience because we're raised up. And I am like, I've almost adopted completely a policy of wearing slacks if it's going to be a seated environment, because I'm just like, I'm not having that on my head on top of it. Like, how am I shifting? Am I this not shifting, right?
Yes, crossing your legs,
Right.
crossing your legs.
Uncrossing your legs, that single moment there in time. No, thank you.
Yes, wearing pants is always a good option in that situation.
That's funny. Well, and I have often also, I always ask to see the room in as well. That's usually the first thing on my mind. How high am I above the other people? But beyond that, I do want to see the room, and not that I can do anything about it. I can't change the lighting. I can take notice that I'm not loving the setup, but I just like to know that ahead of time, as opposed to game day. It's like, then that's on my head too. It's like, all right, I already know it's not ideal, but okay, it's off my plate now, and I'm just back to worrying about what I have to do in the moment. You know what I mean?
Right, Luann. And here's what I find with people who tell me that they get really nervous before speaking engagements, and which is understandable, is that a lot of the time the reason for the nerves is the unknown, the fear of the unknown. And part of the unknown is, well, what is the room going to look like? What is the stage going to look like? How am I going to be seated? Where is the audience going to be? If you can take away that unknown and be able to see what the room looks like and then visualize it for yourself, that's going to help alleviate some of those nerves.
That's a good point. I didn't even think to bring that up, because I have to say I don't often experience that at a level anymore that I have to combat it, okay? But there are times when, you know that somebody's nervous. My feeling, you tell me as a professional coach for speakers, I feel like if I've made a mistake or I've stumbled out the gate, I just keep going. Is that as opposed to, and I guess there's times where you could get it depends, I guess, on how big the gaffe is, right? So if I trip, oh yeah, we're going to have a big whole party about that, because that's going to be funny. Like, I'm not going to, you know what I mean? But I mean, if you just, when you know, the moment when you start speaking, and sometimes if you're not accustomed to it, your voice is a little shaky, you haven't found your ground yet. I guess everybody's different. I shouldn't assume. What if somebody has that feeling? Do you suggest they just plow through until they find their feet in the second or third sentence? Or do you suggest that they say, I've never done this before, I'm a little nervous? Like, what is the best policy? I have an opinion, but I know that it's not based on anything other than me, and that's not right.
Well, I have an opinion too, and so I'm glad to share it. I prefer, I'll couch it that way. I prefer for people not to say things like, this is the first time I've ever spoken. Right. I'm really nervous, because you know what? The audience doesn't really care.
Right. And they don't always know.
They're not going to know. Like, you may feel a little nervous when you start and your voice may be a little shaky. Totally normal. I have found that once people get into, say, the first paragraph or two, like the first minute or two of their presentation, those nerves start to go down, because they start getting into the energy of the room and start getting into their content. Right. If you start making excuses for yourself, you are setting the audience up to then assume that you're not going to be that good.
Right. That's how I'm happy that you said that, because I feel the same way. It's like, maybe I'm not going to give a slam dunk performance today. That's possible. It's always possible. No matter how skilled you are, you could have a bad day, but I don't need you looking for my bad day. Like, I don't need to set it up and tell you this might not be that great because I'm feeling nervous, right? Just do your best. And don't you also find the audience wants you to succeed? So if you're going to be on a panel discussion, do your best, be authentic, be sincere, and that will come through, and the audience will be okay with anything else that's not, you're not Oprah. I mean, you're not, a professional, and we know that, right?
Yes, absolutely. You are a real person, and actually you want the audience to relate to you. Right. You want them to see, especially if it's something that you're maybe a couple of steps ahead of them on your business journey or your interior design journey. And so the audience wants to be able to learn from you, but they don't want you to seem so out of reach, so unapproachable, that they feel like whatever you're sharing is something that they can't apply to themselves.
I love it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to recap a couple of your tips. These are not in the order that you gave them. So one is to be gracious, to do some research on your companions, your fellow panelists and your moderator and the event itself, and be gracious and weave it in authentically where it generally and it actually fits, and there's an opportunity. Don't miss the opportunity to give someone a compliment. Be prepared. Be prepared if you've been given questions, really give them some thought, understand and know what your answers are going to be. And if you just have a topic, then sit and give yourself the gift of some time to think about with really valuable, meaningful content on what it is that you can bring to this topic, and weave in emotion in your before and your after. Express the challenge, paint the story of what happened before, why it wasn't good for you, your employees, your clients, and what was the after, okay? And then you create your own bio, tailor it to your audience, send it to the organizers, but have the paper copy with you. Try and have an opportunity to meet with your fellow panelists and your moderator beforehand. And I would be so bold as to say, if the moderator isn't aware of enough to do this, that you can suggest it, right? There's no reason not to suggest it, right? Okay.
Yes.
And then engage with the audience during the conversation on the stage. Make sure that you speak to and look at the audience, and make sure you engage with your panelists, co-panelists, not just the moderator. Make sure you have your elevator pitch of your business in words. I help so-and-so do this so they can that. And then make sure you check out the room and you feel comfortable and appropriately dressed, whatever that is for you, so that you're not fidgeting with your clothing and your environment because of your own clothing, yada, yada. And then, be yourself, right? Just be yourself and make sure you just have a good time, and don't apologize for anything. Just bring your best A game and leave it on the table, right?
Exactly. And this is like most things in life, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So the first time or two you do a panel, you may look back and you may think, oh, well, I should have said this, or I could have done this. It's okay. Right. That's the way you learn. Experience is how you learn. And if the session has been videotaped, and if the organizers give you a copy of the video, or somehow you have access to it, definitely watch it. Not to be overly critical of yourself, but just to see where there is room for improvement, and also to praise yourself. I think that we, and especially as high performing women, which is who I usually work with, is that we are our own worst critics. And so I really want you to also watch the video and point out all the things that you did really great.
That's a great tip. Because it's absolutely 100% true that there are things that we have done that were really awesome, even if there were some things that we would wish to redo a different way another time. So that's a good thing to know. I love it. And I just want to say before you go that I truly compliment you on the work that you do, Carol. I know firsthand experience. What I love about what you do is that you help us take what we already know and formulate it. You know what I mean? I know when I came to you to work with me to do the keynote speech, and I want to take a minute to describe this, because I think that if anybody does have an opportunity, especially to do a solo presentation, that it's important to do this. And I did it with you because I didn't want to struggle through it on my own. And I remember the very first meeting that we had, you said to me, what is the point? What is the focus? Who is the audience, and this and that, and what do you want to accomplish? And I remember I said something to you to the effect of, I have 35 years in this business. I know so many things. I don't even know where to start and what order to share it in. You know what I mean? And,
yes.
And I said, so I don't know what's relevant. I don't know what's helpful. It's almost like it so well that you don't know what is so insightful and helpful to somebody else. And so you are absolutely expert and genius at basically, the way I look at it was like I brain dumped, and then you were like, these are the 5 things that are amazing about what you know. And then I was able to go and write the speech. It was like, okay, clear the decks of everything else. These are the things I'm going to focus on. So I appreciate and value you. You have a tremendous talent in what you do there, Carol.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Luann. And it was an absolute pleasure working with you. And I learned a lot from you just doing the process and and asking all the questions to dig out all the information from you and to figure out. But that really is what I love doing, is taking what is someone's passion, their business, what they've been doing, their expertise, and distilling it to what are the core components that the audience is going to find most useful. And I'm actually right now in the middle of, in my podcast, the most recent episodes, by the time that our episode airs here, this is exactly what I'm focusing on, is how to find your presentation spine, how to make your content relevant and relatable, how to use story structure to create compelling content. I have some on-air coaching calls. So if listeners are interested in learning more about speaking, about presenting, about sharing their message, about being panelist, about creating that compelling content, I invite them to check out the Speaking Your Brand podcast.
Yeah, it's terrific. I just recently listened to episode 57, how to use simple story structure to create it. And I was thinking, oh yeah, that's what she did with me. She's a genius.
Yeah. It was great, Luann. And I'm so proud of all of the speaking that you've been doing since we worked together last year, and all the opportunities that you're getting to really expand your brand. And so more people know about what you do and how you can help them because of your 35 plus years in the industry and the immense amount of experience, and especially on sales that you have. It's so invaluable.
Yeah, it's
and
fun.
I'm sure that your clients and your listeners appreciate the amount of time that you spend putting together this content for them.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I love it. I love when I'm working side by side with somebody who's truly an expert at what they do. And that's basically what I'm suggesting and saying that you are. So I really appreciate it. And I thank you so much for giving us this list of tips for being a panelist, because I know so many designers are having these opportunities now. And, I want everybody to make the best and the most of every opportunity they have. And that isn't just, client facing. Sometimes it's industry and peer facing. And so what I'll do is I will include a PDF for this episode, and you can find that at www.luannniagara.com/307. Okay, that's luannniagara.com/307. So thank you so much, Carol. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, and I'm sure that we've helped some of our colleagues today be better panelists.
My pleasure, Luann. And you know that we like to talk anytime.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at luannniagara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.